All right, so today we're ranking all the parts of JoJo, and here's how we're gonna rank them. Okay, we're gonna start off by talking about the main character, discuss the main character, or then we're gonna move to the side characters, talk about the side characters. Then we're gonna talk about the abilities. So this is like fighting abilities throughout the parts and how they work, how creative they are, that type of thing. Then we're gonna move to the overall plot of the part. So is it like a good plot? Is it an interesting story? How does it move? That type of thing. Then we're gonna move to the fights. How are the fights? Were they interesting? Were they creative? Did they keep you interested? We're gonna move after that to the main antagonist. So we're gonna talk about okay, like part one is Dio. We'll talk about Dio is a good main antagonist, is a boring whatever as we go. After that, we're gonna place them accordingly to where we think they should be. If we need to re-rank at any point, we will, but I think we'll be pretty good. All right, here we go. All right, so part one. So main character, Jonathan Joestar, the Chad. I like seeing how he develops as he goes throughout the story. So you see him as this like lanky character at first, super skinny, and you see his morals. So he always had good morals. He was always a gentleman, and you see him become super buff and stuff as we go. He as a character, he doesn't develop too much. Uh, he doesn't like learn much as a character. He was just kind of a good character to begin with, kind of thing. So he didn't have to like work towards becoming a better person, if that makes sense. So kind of a flat character, but a good character, if that makes sense. So like he's a likable character, you like him, but nothing changes with him, right? Okay, so side characters were pretty bland in part one. I'm trying to even think of some. I mean, all right. First of all, we have the best side character in the series. I can't deny that. Freaking the Chad Speedwagon. Okay, Godwagon, the legend himself. Okay, besides Speedwagon, you have like a whole bunch of random people that I don't remember their names, and a guy that just jumps on people and then splits their arms apart with his legs. I don't know. And then a big guy somewhere mixed in like a lion or something. Anyways, I there's like a chain somewhere in there too. But oh, the dude with the Zeppeli. Zeppeli was pretty Chad actually. Now that I don't know how I blanked out Zeppeli as just an entire character, but Zeppeli and Speedwagon, good characters. Apart from those two, every other character is just like that's a character. Um, So, I mean, it could be way better, but I don't know. I don't understand how, like, he mixed between making, like, the best characters in the series and the worst in the same part, but it is what it is. All right, so moving on to abilities. So, of course, part one, we don't have stands yet, but we have Hamon. Hamon is pretty good. I really liked the thing that sticks out with Hamon for me in part one was the training because we got to see him get trained by Zeppeli, and a big thing of that was like I think one of my favorite parts of that arc was when he had to kill the vampire with while holding the glass of wine and he couldn't spill a drop. Like I thought that was interesting, and it was kind of like his final test, right? And so I think the issue that comes though is that there's not much you can do with Hamon. It's like punch, stab, like it's like a tool for killing vampires, but after that, it don't do anything for you. Um, so as an abilities, and no one really gets too creative with their abilities, so it was kind of boring. But the thing is too is it's like it's kind of interesting at first, and you're like, oh, what's this? But after a few episodes, it got like, okay, they're just not gonna do anything different, are they? All right, so moving on, we have the overall plot. So the plot is Dio bad man, Orange Man bad yet again, or Yellow Man bad. Here we have so bad Yellow Man. Um, it's kind of interesting because Dio become goes from like being a dick to being evil, and it's like you see he wasn't a dick in the first place; he was evil in the first place, and then he just got worse. But like he was always the same evilness inside. He was just born bad, you know. And I don't know, it's interesting. It's a good starting villain, but Dio comes back way better in part 3, I'd have to say. But oh wait, we're already talking about main villain. I didn't even get to the plot. So the plot, right? They're trying to kill Dio. No, but it's the plot keeps moving. That's what I like about part 1. It's short, it's fast, it's quick, it's to the point, right? They do something, something happens, they react this way. After they react, another thing happens, they react to that, and it keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. It's not 15 episodes of one fight, which doesn't happen through any of the JoJo parts, but it's it's faster paced than the already good paced like JoJo as a series. So I think it was paced really well, and the plot itself was like from an overall view, it was kind of interesting, but it's like it's not too memorable at the same time. It's more like, okay, this is a pretty good start for the series, and that's about it. All right, so moving on to the fights. The fights were creative. They're the essence of what JoJo fights are supposed to be. And like, I mean, that's what JoJo was from the beginning, right? It showed you what the fights are going to be like. The fights in JoJo, as early as part 1 all the way to the end, they're like playing chess but with your fists, right? You're like a boom, queen, boom, like boom, you blundered your queen, boom, checkmate, right? It's or like I have you in check. Oh, not anymore. You have me in check. Oh, checkmate. I win. You never know what's gonna happen, and people are like using their brains almost as much as they're using their fists, right? So, um, how I like to explain it is they have to do as much work like not fighting to win the battle as they have to do actually moving and fighting to do the battle, right? So the essence of JoJo, the fights are good, and every fight they have is a good fight. It's interesting. It keeps you on your toes. You say what's gonna happen. Now, comparatively to the other parts, this part's fights are not insane in any way. Like I said, I just remember the guy with like the jump up and spread their things with your feet and then go down, and then it just didn't work anyways. But what I do like is how they brought back like historical figures and stuff. Like I thought that was kind of cool. And then the final fight with Dio. Well, I guess the second to final fight with Dio part 1, that was interesting. Where they like, yeah, I don't know. It's a dude. What is this? Okay, I think it's. I think the fights are good because JoJo fights are good. But as a JoJo fight part, the JoJo fights were not that good. If that makes sense. Okay. So now the main antagonist, which we accidentally started talking about earlier, Dio, a Chad, kind of the reason every JoJo part starts. Like, if I go through it really quickly, Dio exists, okay? Vampires, like, right? There's vampires, right? This continues like the bloodline and why everything happens and why his life goes the way it does. It continues why he has to learn Hamon. Concerns why he learns Hamon to fight the Pillarmen, and he learns Hamon, and then so that kind of continues to part 2. Now part 3, Joestar Bloodline. Dio's back. Dio keeps moving the series forward. From there, you go to part 4, where you have stand users. I don't know. It's another JoJo, right? Every part is just happened because part 1 happened. It because Dio did the things he did. And he was interesting. He's chaotic. He's evil. And I think he's a good first villain for the series. Although he might not be the best villain. So overall, it's a good part. But every part's a good part. Like, come on, man. Every part's a good part. Okay. I have to be I have to be brutal here, and I have to rank this between the JoJo parts themselves and not based on this compared to other anime I've watched. And comparing this to the other JoJo parts, it's just not as good. Okay, it's not as interesting. Like that's why so many people skip their part or tell people to skip part one. I don't. I'm not a fan of part skipping. I think you need it to like start up the overarching story between all the JoJos. But it's why people skip this part, and it's why people tell their friends to skip this part because it's not interesting. They want to get to the juice, the spice melange, the part three, the stands. All right, that's where people want to get to. Okay, so I think it's going in D, and I think I'm happy with that. And remember, this is compared to other JoJo's. If you honestly believe a JoJo part is worse than this one, like tell me in the comments which one you think. Like maybe part three, but we'll get that. We'll get to that. I just pissed some people off. All right, I hate comments. I'm getting death threats now in the comments. Anyways, moving on to part two. All right, we have the main character, Joseph Chadstar himself. Okay, this is probably my favorite JoJo. I think he's witty, he's funny, he's interesting. Right off the bat, he's just like hilarious. Like he has so many character quirks that make him an interesting character that if nothing else in the series, I want to watch the series just for the main character. Or I just want to watch if nothing else in the part, I want to watch the part just for him because he's so interesting and funny. Now, his interactions with every character are hilarious and he's extremely intelligent and super smart. So that's really fun to see. So I really like him as a main character. I think he's one of the best made JoJos. I'll get that out there right away. So moving on to side characters, that would leave us with like Speedwagon, the Chad again, the Chadwagon, and then you have Caesar, also a Chad, both pretty cool. You have Stroheim, the Nazi, but like if you put the Nazi part aside, he's kind of a cool character, which is kind of hard to do because he's a Nazi, but they kind of just push that aside for the anime and the manga. They're just like, it doesn't really matter that much when you're fighting vampires or pillarmen. So, Stroheim, good character. What was the character? Smokey? Is that his name? Smokey. Smokey was like a character that was there to react to what the other characters were doing, and he didn't do anything in the story at all. He didn't move it in any way. If he wasn't there, the story would be the exact same, like 100% the same, but with the minus of him as a character. So there's some characters that aren't very good as well. Lisa was interesting. Um, I I liked I liked her as a character. I liked her training. I like how like she end up is like the mom and you just didn't know that. So that was interesting. But so now that I think about it, I was gonna say like the side characters weren't too good, but after kind of discussing it, that's where I think my opinion changes in that they did have a lot of good side characters, more so than some of the parts. Well, maybe not, but definitely more so than part one. Okay, for sure more than part one. So I think okay, so that's pretty much it for side characters. But moving on to abilities, um, abilities. So we still have Hamon here, but there's a lot more like they find more creative ways to use Hamon of like, okay, you can do this with it or do that with it, right? So they make Hamon more interesting in part two, and they had to keep it going that way, right? So what the frick is with this ad? Okay, so I think I like Hamon, but by the end of this part is where it starts to get old, and is that's why like it's a good thing that Araki moved to stands. But that's kind of it. That's kind of all I have to say for abilities. Well, I guess also the like the Pillarman abilities. Those were all pretty cool, pretty unique, and it was fun seeing the clash between the Hamon and the Pillarman. So it was interesting. It was a good story, and I think I liked the abilities that the characters had. But like again, this is JoJo, and compare it to like any other parts besides part one, the abilities just aren't as interesting because they don't have stands, okay? The stands are good abilities, okay? So, moving on to overall plot. it was okay. I need a breather here. I need to think thoughts. What do I think about the plot? Okay, so for the plot, I think it's interesting, and it brings you back to, it kind of shows you like how every future JoJo part goes, which is like you have a normal guy who like gets dragged into this thing by fate, and then he's just really cool and does the things he has to do to win, and then he wins, unless you're Jolene. But anyways, so I think the plot is interesting because of that. I mean, there's always room for improvement. As far as JoJo parts go, when we're comparing it to other JoJo parts, there's not as much creativity in how they defeat enemies, which is hard to say because, like, it's hard to say because there is a lot of creativity if you compare it to other series, but when you think about other JoJo fights, like, it's probably like a mid tier within JoJo for how they defeat enemies and what happens as they go. One thing I do like about the plot is that it does keep moving. It's interesting, and every part feels interesting, right? So you have like the training arc was pretty cool. I liked that. Um, I don't know. I just don't have much to say about the plot here. All right, overall, the plot is mid to low mid for JoJo parts, as far as JoJo parts go. Okay. The fights himself pretty interesting. Um, like JoJo taking out the Tommy gun right at the beginning and then shooting up the restaurant. Like, you can't tell me that wasn't super cool. So like that's awesome. Here, let me do something quick. Move this over this ad. There we go. All right. So like so the fights were super interesting. They're fun to watch. They're creative, but like I said, compared to other JoJo parts, they're like mid to low mid for creativity. Probably like perfectly mid, if anything. So that's where I'm gonna leave it for fights. Main antagonist, you have the Pillarmen, cars and trucks and vans and suburbans, all those sorts of things. They're fun. They're interesting. I like their story. I like their background. I like the fights with them. Um, their motives are like okay, their motives, but I don't know, comparing them to other JoJo villains, my only like it brings up my only complaint about part one of my only like big complaints about part two is that they're just like not as interesting as a lot of the other villains are or memorable for that matter. Okay, so to rank it now, I love this part. Joseph kind of carries this part. The side characters were pretty good. A lot of good side characters. Fights were interesting, and for having Hamon as like an abilities to go with, Araki did an amazing job of having interesting fights for what he could do with Hamon at that point. So I think this is a B tier arc. Part three. Our main character, Jotaro. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. I don't like Jotaro. I think he's boring. I think he's flat, and I think he's the worst JoJo, hands down, no doubt. Araki missed with the main character of Jotaro. He's boring. Okay, there's no quirks as a character. He's mean to women. Boom, amazing character. He's a bad father. Boom, amazing character. Nope, I don't like him. Okay, uh, he doesn't even become a bad father until he's a father in part six. Okay, so it's just he's just a bad character. Okay, there's nothing interesting about him. He's just edgy. Okay, like I don't know. Like from the first moment I saw him to the last, like he's just edgy. That's his personality. He's edgy. He doesn't talk much. Like it's don't. Like I don't know. Any funny moment that happens with him is initiated by another character. Pretty much. Like he's just boring. Okay, so I have to say that kind of brings down the part because like the part revolves around him and he's just bad. Okay. All right, side characters. This part has some of the most like it defines the Joe Bro atmosphere, right? Like you got Joe Bros up the wazoo. Okay, starting off like I mean, there's Kakyoin, Polnareff, Avdol, the dog that I forgot the name of somehow. Iggy. The dog, Iggy, that I totally didn't forget the name of. And had to look it up. Uh all of the second don't let me forget Joseph, my favorite JoJo, okay? All of the side characters that are super good, like almost make up for the fact that Jotaro is so trash. Okay? So Araki like made the worst main character possible and then made some of the best side characters possible. So it almost like equals itself out, but it doesn't because Jotaro just brings it down even somehow. Uh I don't know, you also have like okay, I think this so overall side characters like very good. Even among JoJo side characters, they're good side characters, I'd say. Moving on to abilities. Okay, this part introduced stands, which are one of the best power systems in animes. They're a representation of your fighting spirit, right? So the amount of like unique abilities you can have with stands is it's like unlimited. You can do anything with a stand, and Rocky made an amazing power system and a very creative power system. And the best thing about this power system is that it complements his style of writing that battles are like chess matches, you know? So it was the perfect power system he could have implemented for JoJo as a series and for his writing style. So that is I think that's why JoJo became so successful as a series is because of the mix of stands and the chess battle like fights. Okay? Now, one thing I remember when I was watching and I was asking my friend that was kind of like leading me through the series or got me into the series, told me to try in the first place. Um, I was like, why don't any of the JoJos learn Hamon? Because like, wouldn't it help them in certain circumstances? Like, I mean, we see Joseph use it a few times or a couple times throughout part three. You know, looking back now, like it makes sense. Like when I was there, like the only parts I knew were Hamon parts with vampires, where Hamon was everything. You didn't have Hamon, you were screwed. So I was like, how does stands make up 100% for Hamon? But I can see why they didn't. But I still think it'd be cool if Hamon came back in the future in some aspect, like it maybe in part 9 or something. Like I don't know because it's interesting how the JoJos who had Hamon, who could use Hamon, their stands became like viney and different, you know? So that I think that's pretty cool, and I think it'd be nice to see Hamon come back. And I was a little disappointed at the time that it was gone, but looking back now, I'm like not disappointed at all that it was gone because stands are just so much better than Hamon. Uh, so abilities, continuing with abilities. The stands, as far as stands go themselves, the ability like the stands were like kind of basic in part three, and it was more of like Araki figuring out new ideas he could do with this new power system he created. As you go through the series and he gets used to it, they become a little bit more and more interesting. And like, but there's like an obvious difference in creativity of stand abilities from part three to part four. So I still think like as far as stands go, they're kind of boring. But if you compare them to part one and two, the abilities are better because it's just more interesting with the stands. All right, moving on to the plot. I like, I like, and kind of don't like how the whole thing is about just them trying to get to Dio. So why I like that is because it keeps the story kind of moving. Like you you know where the series is going if that makes sense. So I right away like you're like okay, the goal is to get to Dio in Egypt. So the series is about them getting to Egypt. Now, what I don't like is how long it got dragged out to the point where it was like, okay, just freaking get to Dio. Like, I'm done watching the same fight over and over and over again of like new stand dude like pops up and we have to fight him again and we think we're gonna lose and it looks like we're gonna lose, but at the last second, we're fine. Like it was really fun at first watching the fights and you thought it was interesting, but as it went, it just got a little bit more and more like boring, with a few exceptions. Um, like the gambling part, I thought was really cool. I thought that was fun, and I remember that's pretty memorable looking back. And then you have like I really like the guy with the sun stand. Like that was funny because like they all start laughing and then they just throw a rock and like that was that fight. So that was kind of funny. But besides those, there's like I don't know, the most memorable parts of part 3, I feel like aren't the fights. Besides the Dio fight at the end, the memorable parts aren't the fights themselves. It's like the funny moments that happen while they're going there. Like when they're fighting the magnet dude and like have Don and Joseph have the connection. Like that was pretty funny. Or like the lick thing with Kakyoin, like that was funny too. But so there's a lot of funny moments, and I think that's like is more memorable than the fights in this part. So I think the fights in this part were kind of lacking compared to any of the other parts. I think the only part it has better fights than is part 1. So yeah. All right. Main antagonist Dio, one of the best main antagonists, and for sure one of, if not the best main antagonist fight, or probably not the best, but one of the best main antagonist fights they in the series. So it's really like built up, and when you get there, like this battle's cool. Like they're figuring out his ability. Like Jotaro is getting like better and better at stopping time as you go, and it just keeps getting more and more interesting. And the battle, like all the way to the end, like kept me on my toes, like what's gonna happen, to the point where like it looked like they were flying at one point, but like they weren't. But it was like the battle was just interesting, and like Kakyoin fighting him first and dying and then giving him the information, like the key to the stand. It was like all around, it was just an interesting fight. And the villain himself, although Dio wasn't prevalent through most of the arc or most of the part, like he's just a good villain when you see him. So that was fun. So now to rank it, I think Jotaro. There's a couple things like it's easy to look at what's good about this part, but so to like mention the things that drag it down, you have Jotaro, who's just a flat character, and then you have it's like needlessly long. It's needlessly long. It's way longer than it needs to be, and I'm going kind of by the anime here. But when we get to part like 7 and 8, we obviously have to talk about manga, but where I'm kind of like I haven't read the manga for parts 1 through 5, so I'm going for the anime by this. So I don't know if in the manga it had better pacing or not, but it was just terribly paced in the anime. So because of that, that really drags it down as well. So because of those two things, it kind of like just spoils the good parts of the series, and that's why I think it's C. Okay, I'm happy with this list so far. Um, like going through an in-depth like thought about each of these parts and putting them in these locations, they're about where I think they're right where I would have put them if I didn't go through an in-depth thought. So I think like I'm kind of happy with where I'm putting these so far. Okay, part 4, main character Josuke, phenomenal JoJo. Interesting because he feels different than the previous 3 JoJo in a way I can't really describe. It's more just like his vibe is different. Like if Jonathan, Joseph, and Jotaro had like this kind of similar vibe, Josuke just kind of throws it out the window and is just like different. Like he's his own dude, and he doesn't feel like carried by the protagonists before him, the JoJos before him. Um, so something that differentiates him from Jotaro, for example, is he has a lot of character quirks, like his hair, or um, how he treats people too is more interesting. So I really like that. So I don't know. As a character, he's a lot better than Giorno for sure. I don't think he's as good as Joseph, but he's definitely better than Jonathan. So really good. Main. It was probably like it was. I don't know. I don't. If I compare it to later JoJo's as well, it was still kind of an interesting JoJo. So I think as far as the main character aspect goes, very good main character. Okay, so for side characters, this part was kind of built around its side characters. It was the first, or it wasn't the first part, but it was like it felt like it heavily focused on a lot of the side characters' fights, which was really cool. I really like seeing. I really like Koichi. Koichi was cool. How his stand develops, and one thing to think about, right? So, stand is a manifestation of your battle spirit. So so characters in JoJo that have like stands that develop into different acts, like Act One or whatever. Yeah, so characters that have stands that have like acts, like Act One, Act Two, Act Three. What's happening is sorry. So characters that have stands that have acts, like Act One, Act Two, Act Three. If you think about it, what's happening is because stands are a manifestation of your battle spirit. What it's saying is that that character's battle spirit is developing, right? So, which is kind of a rare thing. So characters usually tend to have a set in stone battle spirit. Like that's what it is. From the beginning of their part to the end, they have just that's what their battle spirit is what it is. Now, you have those few characters like Koichi, and this is the first character we see, where he develops as a character, yes, but what he's developing throughout the series more than anything is his battle spirit, and that's why he has different acts to his stand. So other side characters, you have Okayasu. Okayasu's funny because he has like one of the best stands in all of JoJo, and he's just too dumb to use it right. Like that was just almost hilarious. You have what's I don't think they gave him a name. The alien guy with the stand Earth, Wind, and Fire. That was a stand, right? I don't know. I don't know if that ever confirmed that was a stand or not. But the alien dude was awesome. I forgot his name, but alien guy, he was funny. Um, the girl who just went insane for Koichi, that was funny. I can't remember like names. It's been so long since I watched it now, but she is funny. You have Rohan Kishide, dude, like a legend. Dude, what a good character and what an interesting stand he has as well. And then like I mean Jotaro comes back. He's just Jotaro. He's being like a crappy character still. And then dude, Joseph comes back and Joseph is funny. So that was great. And he's like senile now. So that was hilarious. So as far as side characters go, really good side characters. I'd say like even maybe better than part three, but maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's probably around the same, if not better. Moving on to abilities. The stands took a big step up from part three in terms of creativity and their abilities. This is where you start to see what more stands are going to be like going forward. And also, I mean, you see the stand, like how stands are named has changed. They're like named after stands or after stands are named after stands. The stands are named after songs now or bands or albums, whatever that is. So that's kind of interesting. And I mean, that was obviously a good thing because I don't know, it gives a little bit more like it gives a little bit more jazz to the characters if that makes sense by having them like named after songs. And I mean, if you like a song or if you like an album or a band that a stand is named after, that stand becomes like a little bit more like interesting to you. So that's cool to see. Uh, actually, I kind of want to go back to side characters quick because I'm thinking about some of the fights they go through with like lesser villains, like not the main villain but lesser villains, and they're all like really interesting. Like not every character that they fight is a villain or something. Like they have that chef that has like he starts like his stand is like food that can like fix you. That was super interesting. So I think honestly it probably has I'm trying to think, but I think it has the best side characters. I'm hesitant to say this for like 100% sure, but I'd say part four probably has the best side characters of the parts. I don't know. Let me know if you agree with that or not in the comments. But so back to abilities though. A lot of the abilities very interesting, very unique. Uh, Josuke's ability is like super interesting with being able to like heal or put things back to how they were. Bites the dusto, very interesting. He gets new variation and stuff. That was cool too. The hand, like I said, that's a cool stand. Rohan Kishiba's stand. What is that called? Anyways, Rohan Kishiba's stand, very cool stand. Like, what an amazing stand. I don't explain it, but that's one of my favorite stands just because of how creative it is. You have that stand where it's like what is it? Is it like a doll or something, or it turns people into a doll? I don't remember that one, but that one was cool too. The freaking the girl like that kidnapped Koichi, like her stand with her hair, that's cool. Like all the abilities are pretty cool and interesting, and but even by JoJo standards, like the abilities were really good. So for abilities, good abilities. All right, plot. I really like the plot for part four because it's not all about like one character. Like not every fight ties to the villain, but it creates kind of a sense of the city they're living in, and it makes Morio as a location the most interesting. I don't think it's even controversial. That sort of thing. I don't think it's even controversial to say Morio is the best setting in the JoJo of any of the JoJo parts. Like because I mean it's really the only setting where like an entire part takes place in, and then because part eight is just in Morio too. So, but part eight Morio and part four Morio just don't have the same vibe. I have to be honest, but we'll get to that later, I suppose. So it has the best setting by far, which kind of adds to this thing. So everything is kind of like the plot kind of builds the city, and the plot once it starts to like slowly more and more tie into Kira, and by the end Kira is like this amazing fight, and I don't it feels a little bit more light-hearted than some of the other parts because like it's hard to say this because like the main villain isn't as bad as some of the other main villains, and you're like, okay, he's a serial killer, but at the same time, like, if we think about like the part six villain, like he just resets the entire world and like basically kills everyone. So I'd say like as far as as far as villains go, he's not the worst villain, or not. He's not the worst moral villain. Like he doesn't have the worst morals. So plot, pretty damn good plot. I really like the plot. The fights, all the fights. I kind of talked about this with the abilities earlier, but the fights were super interesting. Like almost because of the abilities that the characters have. So I'm kind of glossing over the fights here, but like the fights were amazing. And in the final villain fight with Kira at the end, very good fight. Main antagonist Kira, probably I don't know. The only main antagonist I think could maybe be better than Kira is Funny Valentine, and I think by like a slim margin, I think Kira's a better antagonist. Just in terms of being interesting and being like I don't know story wise how he's written, I think it has the best main antagonist of the parts. So okay, so now to rank it, very good part, very good part. I think it's S tier among JoJo parts. Um, I think if I rewatched or reread any part, I think it'd be part four or maybe part seven or eight. But like it'd be part four, and then I'd like maybe do part seven or part eight. Like it's definitely part four. Super rewatchable, super interesting part. Moving on to part five. All right, we're over halfway through now. Main character Giorno Giovanna. Giorno is a great character. Um, I don't know. Okay, Giorno is a pretty good character. He's not like the best, but he's certainly not the worst, and he's kind of like mid among JoJo's. And I don't feel like that's too controversial to say. He's just like kind of mid. So I just don't have more to say about that. Like he's I don't know. He doesn't have too many quirks. He doesn't talk too much. A lot of the focus isn't on him all the time. Um, he has some badass moments, but he's not like I don't know. I feel like I don't know. There's some funny parts with him, like when he drinks like the urine or whatever, but he like puts it into the octopus, so he's not actually drinking the urine as like a joke, or like he does it to like show them that he's a badass or whatever. Like that was all cool. So I think he has some cool quirks, but like I just stand by the fact that as far as JoJo like main characters go, he's just mid. So moving on to side characters, you have the crew, the Bucciarati gang. Speaking of Bucciarati, very good character. He was Bucciarati, very good character all the way up to the end, and even after he died when he went into the clouds, like that was great. Narancha, probably one of the saddest deaths, maybe besides Caesar in the series. I can't really think of other deaths that would have been like more sad than that one. But yeah, Narancha like super sad, but he was a good character all up to the end, and his stand was like pretty interesting. Uh, what is it? Fugo, Purple Haze. Purple Haze was like I don't know. That's the thing too. Like the moment you say Fugo, you just think about Purple Haze because the character himself wasn't that interesting. For Mista was like a pretty good character. I like how he's just kind of like he's loyal and he fights and he wants to win, so that was cool. And then I forget for some reason I'm somehow blanking on the last dude's name, but he was pretty cool. He's like wouldn't trust Giorno at first, and then as it went, it got better, and then eventually got clapped. But he was a good character up to the end, and he was really useful. His stand really helped, for a lot of things. Other side characters like Koichi. I don't. Koichi didn't really even need to be in the part. Like honestly, it was really cool, and I'm glad he was. But like, he didn't really do anything to advance the story at all. Uh, the the coolest side character inclusion was Polnareff for sure, Mr. Turtleman. That was really cool, and I think the part is better because he's in it. To be honest, so it was really cool seeing him, and I'm glad they put him in it. Let's move to abilities. The stands in part 5. It's hard to explain it, but the vibe of the stands fits the vibe of the arc and like their location, the setting, like in Italy and stuff. It's like it's I don't know, it's so hard to explain, but I feel like anyone who's watched part 5 understands what I'm talking about, and that the vibe of the stands fits the vibe of like the arc. Uh Giorno's stand like is really interesting, and I really like it, and I really like freaking Requiem, dude. Requiem was lit. And he probably has like the best stand of the main JoJo's. Um and like if you had a fight between all of the main JoJo's, either Giorno or Josuke Part 8 would win. Like undoubtedly. Um so that's I mean that's kind of interesting, and that's something to think about. So that was really cool. I think he has a really good stand, and you know what's sad is his stand's almost cooler than he is. You know, I think it's not. I'm trying to remember if there's any sentient stands before part 6, sorry, part 5, and I can't think of any at all. I'm like 90% sure part 3 didn't have any, and then I can't think. Oh, part 4. No, part 4 had Koichi stand was kind of sentient, right? It could talk and stuff. So, um, but I don't know. There's a lot more sentient stands in part 5, and it's hard to think about like kind of what that means. Like, why are there sentient stands? What does that do for us? It's hard to like because when we talk about like acts, like I explained earlier, what like acts are for stands, what they mean, but what you have like a battle spirit. What determines if your battle spirit is sentient? You know what I mean? Like maybe it's something to do on like about like your battle spirit like comes from someone else maybe. Like you're using someone else's battle spirit, so that person's battle spirit is kind of talking, if that makes sense. So like you have this inherited like an inherited will, you have an inherited battle spirit. Um so that's the only thing I can really think of that like like the meaning behind sentient stands might be, which if I think about that to the sentient stands I know about, I think it kind of makes sense. But I don't know. I feel like I don't know. There's a lot to think about there. Maybe I'll make a video on that at some point. But the stands overall, the abilities from like the villains' abilities, I don't know. They're all interesting. As far as JoJo stands go, they're like they're like probably mid. I don't know. Once you get past part 3, all the stand abilities kind of like are good, you know? So it's hard to like kind of rank stand abilities. I'd say series wide, like you have to include Hamon in these. It's like the abilities are like upper mid, you know what I mean? So good abilities, plot, really good plot. Like to become the mob boss, they have to keep moving, and then it's like protecting. Or it's like it starts off as like protecting Trish, you know, and then oh by the way, Trish was a good character. I forgot to mention her. Good character, good stand, cool, squishy stand. Anyways, plot starts with like protecting Trish, and it keeps going like further and further. Okay, now we have to do this, and now we have to do this. Now we have to do this, and by the end, he's the leader of a freaking mob family at like 15 years old. So that's cool, but I like it because it feels fast paced and it doesn't have the same. Although everything is leading to fighting the main villain at the end, it feels like the arc is like leading. Okay, so like although the arc is leading to fighting Diavolo, whatever you want to call it, however you want to pronounce it. It doesn't feel like part 3 did, where everything was like, okay, you're just an obstacle for us to get to Dio. It felt like they had to fight those characters to fight those characters, and it just happened that they had to like go through them to get to their final goal. So I think it did the vibe of the part 3 plot, but in a much better way. So I really like the plot, and beside it's probably the third or fourth best plot of the JoJo's after like for sure part 7 and part 4 and then like maybe part 8. Um but yeah, who knows? I honestly part 8 I don't know. We'll get into that later. But it has a pretty good plot. It's high up among JoJo plots. Uh okay, fights. All the fights were super interesting. Honestly, some of my favorite fights in the series now that I think about it. And that kind of elevates this part more than I kind of thought about it at first. So like I don't know, one fight that sticks out to me was the guy with the stand craft work where he can like pause items in air, and then he started like climbing the rocks and he was like tapping the bullets, you know? Like a lot of the fights were just fun and interesting. Or the fight with Notorious B.I.G. and like Trish like awakening her stand kind of thing to like for the first time just make them survive that. I don't know. I just like that I like the fights in part 5 maybe more than any other part. So a lot of good fights in part 5. So main antagonist. Oh, also I didn't mention, dude. What's the dude? Shoot. One of my favorite fights as well is like Diavolo, or I guess Doppio, and I forgot his name, but the guy with the stand Metallica. Like I love the Metallica stand. I thought that's such a cool stand. Um, but like just like that's just a side fight, and it's an amazing fight. Okay, every fight in part 5 is like just interesting and fun and a good fight. Uh main antagonist. Diavolo slash Doppio. Very, very good character, and he has like this split personality. And it's interesting because they gave two different stands to Diavolo and Doppio. And some people might think like, oh no, they just have the same stand, but he's thinking he's just thinking he can't use the full ability of a stand, so he's using just a little bit of it. No, you can look it up. Doppio's stand is Epitaph. So he does actually have a separate stand, although similar because they are similar people with similar battle spirits because they're the same person, but they are different stands, which is interesting. So it's like this actual split personality villain, which was just kind of a unique idea that I think was kind of like interesting from Araki for Araki to do, and it was a smart thing for him to do because it just made it interesting. Um, the final fight with him too was like super cool and like this kind of battle over the arrow. And once Giorno got Requiem, like the fight was just over and he didn't even know it. So that's why I love it so much, this part so much too. And like as I've been talking about this arc, like going through these like categories we talk about, like I like this arc more and more. So I think I would have put it in like B, but I think it's easily A after talking about it and thinking about how good like the fights they are. Like the whole series is just interesting. Like I could go watch any episode and it'd be a good episode. Like it'd be fun to watch and interesting and keep me on my toes even though I know what's happening. All right, so I mean we have one in each category now. S, A, B, C, D. Filled out kind of well so far. All right, moving on to part 6. I like Jolene as a character. I think she's interesting. And she's funny and has her quirks, unlike her dad, who's just a terrible character. I don't think I've said that yet, so I just want to make sure I said that. Her dad's a terrible character. But I think she's a really good character. That's all I'm going to say about it. I can't really go too much into detail. Not that I won't, like, I can't. Like, I don't know what else to say. I just, like, she's just interesting. She's good. Like, it's fun watching her as a character, you know? Side characters, all the Joe bros. What's up, bro? I can't do the voice well. But I like the side characters here. There's like one character that sticks out is Emporio. I really like Weather Report. There's a lot of characters throughout that are like really quirky and weird, and I kind of like that because it makes sense because they're like in a prison, you know. So that's kind of cool. It has a lot of like unique characters for this park, so it's one of the best parts for side characters probably. Uh, abilities. The stands in this part, um, I don't know. I think the stands are pretty interesting because you have like Jolene's stand, which is really cool, and I really like her stand. It's honestly one of my favorite main JoJo stands. So that it's kind of cool and it's got drip. It's got hella drip. So I really like her stand. When it comes to other character stands, like Ermi's stand is pretty cool. Weather Report, very cool stand. Like one of my favorite in the series and one of the most broken in the series as well. Uh, you have Poochie's stands. All those are kind of interesting. Bohemian Rhapsody is probably one of the most like interesting stands in the series, and more than any other stand in the series, it has an effect on the entire world, where like everyone in the world was affected by it. So that was interesting as well. So I don't know. I I'm trying to think about like any stands I don't like, and there's not really any stands that I don't like. I think they're all interesting and they all lead to interesting fights. But we'll go back to fights in a second. So overall plot, I like the plot of part 6. I wish they got out of the prison a little sooner. The prison kind of got old fast, and it was just like, why can't we just leave this at this point? It's kind of annoying that we're still here. Uh, if they got out like a little bit faster the prison, I think it would have been a little bit better, but it's still pretty good. I kind of like how it progresses from Jolene to trying to get out of prison to something that's like bigger than herself and trying to like save the world kind of at this point. So now that I kind of remember the plot a little bit more, I do like the plot. I think it's like a pretty good plot. It's above average for JoJo, I'd say, or maybe like average or just above average. I don't know, but somewhere in there. Uh, fights. I'm trying to think about the fights. There's not many fights I found interesting. Um, part 5 had really good fights, and then you go to part 6, and the only fight I remember that was like I'm probably missing. I'm probably not thinking of one. But the only fight I remember thinking was like super cool was like wasn't even really a fight. It was like for some reason I don't know why I thought this was so cool, but it was like Jolene trying to go to like the green baby, and she keeps getting smaller, so she has to figure out like how do I do this. I thought that was pretty cool. The fight where like Jolene gets like shrunk down to like a rat and it's just like be in the rat body or whatever. That was kind of interesting. And then you have like the other stand that was interesting is like the one that like makes people like just aggressive. Like that one was pretty cool. But like then again, I don't know. Other than that, like the best fight, like even the final fight wasn't too good. I think like one of the better fights was like the fight that they had like in a dream where they thought they were fighting like the assassin dude, you know? So that was kind of interesting, and then they just didn't have that thing. But that entire fight was like kind of trippy and cool at the same time. So I guess that was a good fight. But overall, I just didn't really like the fights in part six that much compared to a lot of like most of the other parts. So I'm gonna say bad fights for that. Main antagonist Poochie, Dio's boyfriend, kind of like not that interesting. Um, it just kind of felt at that point like, oh, we have to deal with Dio again. Like he just like won't stay down, and it's also kind of like the only main antagonist like do like to win, even if he didn't entirely win too. Like no one really won. Everyone just got fucked over. So that was kind of interesting. But I think as far as main antagonists go, he was a little bit more boring. I I'd go as far as to say he was the worst main antagonist in JoJo. If you consider part 1 Dio different than part 3 Dio, I'd say maybe part 1 Dio was like no, I can't even say that though, because part 1 Dio was still pretty interesting. I just don't think Poochie was that interesting. It just felt like he was trying to accomplish something of like Dio's again, and it just felt like a rip off of Dio. It didn't even feel like a good Dio. It just I don't know. Looking back, it was just kind of a boring main antagonist. So, kind of a bad main antagonist. So, I don't know. The best thing about this part is the side characters and the main character. I think like okay, not sorry, not the main character herself, but her stand is really interesting. I really like her stand. So her stand kind of like carries in terms of like interestingness, and then she's uses it pretty well too, so that was cool to watch. So I think the creativity of her using her stand made the part more interesting to watch than like I don't know part one or maybe even part two. Like part two, I really like part two, but it might have been more interesting to watch this part than a part like that, or definitely it was definitely more fun to watch than like part three, you know. So it's like I'd say this part is it really gets dragged down by like confusion, and that like a lot of the things just like didn't make sense if you don't like reread them three times over to realize okay, this is why they're doing that. So I think it was like too confusing, and maybe I'm just tripping, but I think as an overall, if I look at this part, I think I have to put it in B tier. I'm torn between B tier and C tier. I think I'm gonna go with C tier. But then I don't know. Because then it's like, do I think this is on the same level as part three, or do I think it's on the same level as part two? I think I'm gonna put this in B tier instead. Because I don't feel good putting that in C tier with Jotaro's part. So I think that's it. I think B is a better spot than C, because I think part six is better than part three. Okay. Part seven, we have the main character is Johnny, and I like Johnny. He's a very fun character. He has a lot of his own quirks and stuff as well. So he's a fun character to watch. Okay, that's how I want to say this and how I want to put it. He's fun to watch. He's like I want to see more of him, and I like the scenes that he's in because it's interesting. Okay, side characters, we have the return of the Zeppeli with the Zeppeli curse to get clapped, of course, but he's kind of like the side character. There's a lot of other side characters that aren't like Joe Bros, you know. Like you have a lot of like reincarnations of people that were they didn't feel as good as the original character. Like redid Dio didn't feel as good as the original Dio, you know, and he had like a different stand, and then another version of him had the correct stand or whatever. So a lot of the side characters kind of got jumbled, but at the same time, it was fun to see them because you got to see a lot of different parts of JoJo's coming back as like slightly different people. So I have to say above average side characters, but then like it has a really good Joe Bro, like one of the best Joe Bros. Okay, so that's how I want to put it. It gets brought up if you took the side characters minus Zeppeli, it'd be like above average, but then it's like above average. You're above average when you include like the Joe Bro, you know? And then so I think pretty good side characters when it comes to JoJo, I suppose. Abilities, stands. This is where stands started to get more confusing on like how you got them. So a lot of this has to do with like the body of Jesus. Like the body of Jesus gives stands. So it was like it seems way harder to get stands. It seems like you have to get lucky to get a stand in part 7, in part 8 for that matter. But then in part like 3, they're giving out stands. You get an arrow. You get an arrow. You get a stand. You get a stand. It's like there's a big difference here between universes, you know? Universe 1 and Universe 2 in terms of how stands are like received. So, and then what wait, how did Jotaro get a stand? Jotaro's stand was weird too cuz it just like showed up. It was just like, "Hi there. Start platinum." Anyways, I stands have always been interesting on how you get them, and I wish like Araki was a little bit more singular in like this is how stands get this is how you get a stand. Period. Like if it was arrows, like if they could have kept the arrows, that would have been cool. But it just gets interesting and weird in how it happens. Um abilities. So this is where it gets interesting because stands take okay, stands are obviously still the central like fighting power here, but they take a slight, very slight, but a slight step back in terms of prevalence. Okay, now this is like minuscule. Okay, and the only reason they take that minuscule step back and how important they are is because you have this new ability of like the body of Christ doing its thing that it can do. Okay, so you have to consider like the body of Christ in this ability like region as well now. Okay, so Tusk was really cool. I really like Tusk. I really like how it develops. And going back to this act thing, how I explained earlier, acts. If you have a stand, that's an act. You're developing your fighting spirit, right? So when he's developing his as he's developing his stand, Johnny, what he's really happening, it's not him like he's trying to figure out how to develop his stand. But when he's trying to figure out how he's developing his stand, what he's doing to develop it is developing himself. Okay? So that's where I really like that's one of the things that really makes me like part 7 a lot is because of how he's like upgrading his stand as he goes, right? And spin was interesting because like it didn't even like you didn't even think like Zeppeli has stand for a while. Like you just thought it was his freaking spin, but then he did have stand. But I don't know. I like spin as well. Spin also is like kind of a thing. Spin has a big factor, and then it's weird because it kind of took like a backseat in part 8. Like no one gave a shit about spin anymore. So that's kind of interesting. But there's a lot of there's almost too many abilities in part 7, and that kind of brings it down. That it's like when you're mixing colors, right? When you're like painting it and you're mixing colors, you can mix like I don't know my colors, but like you mix two colors and it creates like this pretty color, right? But if you mix like all the colors, it just becomes brown, right? And I feel like that's kind of what happened in part 7 with abilities. The individual abilities are super interesting, and I like to see that way. But if you look from an overall point of view, it's just brown. Like they're all like it kind of everything is jumbled together. But honestly, I can't really let that take down my opinion of this part that much because every aspect of this part, and if you look individually at the abilities, it's still so good. So like honestly, when I take this into account for ranking, that even though it gets a little jumbled up, it doesn't really affect where I'd rank it, and it's going to be ranked high. So, moving on to overall plot, I really like the plot. It probably has, I'm trying to think. It probably has the best plot, maybe apart from like part 4. I think it's the most well thought out part, and I really like how everything ties in with each other, and I like how everything revolves around this race and how the race like leads them to new enemies and new like situations. So it feels more natural than like the race in part 3 did. And it even feels like so if part 3, part 5 and part 7 have the same style of plot where it's like they're going to a new location constantly and they have to keep following something or their goal is to get somewhere. Part 3 did it the worst. Part 5 did it like the second best, and part 7 like perfected it. Okay. So part 7 did what part 3 couldn't, and then it made better what part 5 could do, right? So that was really good. So plot, very good, very interesting. Keeps you on your toes and it keeps you thinking like where is this going? And a lot of the JoJo plots, like you know where they're going and you can almost tell what's gonna happen with a few exceptions here and there, but part 7 you never really know what's happening and you don't know why a lot of the stuff is happening until as you go things get more revealed to you and more revealed to you. So I really like that, and that's why part 7 is honestly really good. And I think part 7 when part 7 anime releases, I think JoJo as a series is going to get like a big like uptick in people again like it did after during part 5. In part 6 not that many people really are joining JoJo. I think that's kind of Netflix's fault though too. Um, just to kind of go off a tangent really quick about this, like dropping the episodes in batches was like such a terrible idea for Netflix to do. It kind of pissed me off. It ruins the hype because if you do one 20-minute episode a week, that entire next week, everyone's talking about stuff that happened in this 20-minute episode. Or you can have, or you can, what? How many episodes they drop? Like 12. So they drop, I think it's 12. So. It's 12 episodes, right? They dropped 12 episodes, and for the next month, people talked about different moments across these 12 episodes, and it's like no one's talking about the same stuff, so no, there's no unity. Where community like people are talking about multiple things in multiple chat rooms that revolve around the same thing, and then the series died in a month. Like no one gave a shit. No one talks about part 6 anymore. Anime right now because no one gives a shit about it. People would still be talking about it right now if it was weekly. So it kind of pissed me off that Netflix did batches because it just kills the hype of the series. Which, if you remember part 5, anyone that's around for part 5 like knows like the hype was insane. Like every week it was lit, and then like even though like you could just go read the manga and know what's gonna happen, it was like lit. You're like, okay, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. It happened. It kept going. Everyone talked about it online. You talk about it online for the next week. Then another episode comes out. You talk about that for the next week. Another episode comes out. You talk about that for the next week. It was just fun. It was a fun environment, and it made the JoJo community like more interesting and a little less toxic for a little bit. But then they just kind of ruined that in part 6, and I don't know if they keep this up, it might kill the JoJo anime. Which I mean, it won't entirely do that, obviously, and that's a big statement to say, but it's 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 not expanding on it for sure. Like they could have done way better, and it's just I don't know why they did that. All right, so back to what I was saying, the plot's good. Fuck whatever, cool plot. Fights. The fights were really fun, and I really like the fights. Oh, really quick, I want to go back to abilities and side characters and talk about one of my favorite stands in the entire series, which was I can't even remember the dude's name. I can't believe I'll have things that are my favorite series, and I can't remember the freaking people they're about. But the guy, it's called like A True Man's World, and he has like the thing where he can set time back a little bit. Like he just sets it back. So I thought that was really cool, and that character was really interesting. But all right, but so it kind of jumped back now to fights. The fights were really cool. I like how like horses were like included in the fights sometimes, and I liked how a lot of the battles like were like holding you back from going forward in the race. I like how, and honestly, part 7 for the main antagonist fight at the end was probably my favorite, if and probably the best final antagonist fight in terms of like going through things and like the character. Okay, we're moving into, so okay, just to overall do fights, like the fights were good, cool. They're not like insane, like they're not on the level of part 5 fights, I think, but they're probably like third best probably, or fourth best in the series. So moving on to the main attack now, what like elevates this part to legendary status, okay, is Funny Valentine and how good of a character he is. The thing about like Funny Valentine is it's like his motives almost like, not quite, but they almost make Johnny the villain, if that makes sense. Like they almost make Johnny the bad guy. So like you start to question, they don't, right? They like he's still bad. Like Funny Valentine is still a bad guy, but you start to question like, is Johnny even fighting for the right cause here? And like Funny Valentine just wants to like be the best president possible and make the U.S. the best it can be, you know, and like the best for his citizens and stuff. So that was kind of interesting, and um, he went about it in a weird way, like where it's like you're harming other people, you know. So that stinks. But the final fight and his design with like, he has the most badass design of any main villain in JoJo, like without a doubt. Like he's the American flag etched in his back of scars from because he was a prisoner of war and they etched it into his back. Like that's badass, dude. That dude's lit for just for the scar across his back. Like I've thought about getting a tattoo of that, of like the of what he has, because I think it's so badass. Like it's so cool. Um, so really cool character design, and I can never find it online when I look for it, but there's like this panel of him coming out of an American flag, and it's like super cool because he can like go into objects, you know, or like to move in different dimensions and stuff. And the fact that there was different dimensions like working together for this one stand was like really weird and cool at the same time. It was weird in a good way. So really good main antagonist that like kind of brought the plot together and made the plot super interesting. So overall, now we're gonna rank this this part, and I don't think I have to like argue that this part is an S tier. Like it's easily an S tier, and honestly, there's a lot of I don't know if I could say which one of these is better. If I had to, I don't know if I could say. It's really hard to say. Anyways, all right, let's talk part 8. I love part 8. It's from every point of view, it's not like that insanely good of a part, but it's one of my favorites because it's just like fun to watch, and it so like we'll slide into the main character topic here. Josuke, we're gonna call him Josuke 2. You can refer to him as Josuke Part 8, but because of how much I'm gonna say his name here, I just don't want to keep saying it. So Josuke 2 is like funny and he's interesting, and he's the fact that he's like relearning so many things, or I guess learning because he's his own person, right? Uh, um, the fact that he's learning all these things in like basics, it makes for some funny moments, and it makes him more of an interesting character. Like the fact that he sleeps under a mat under the mattress, right? That's funny. And then he's like, wait, how do you get pressure then? Like it's funny. And then you have like he has 4 balls. Like that's fucking badass. I want 4 balls. That's cool. Why can't I have 4 balls, dude? I'm jealous of him. That's why I think he's cool. I'm jealous of his 4 balls. I'm just gonna say it. He's twice the man I'll ever be. Literally. All right. But he's just a fun character, and in terms of like my personal, like, I can say this character's written better, this character's written better, which we'll talk about in a second. But if it, like, aside from like saying this character's written better, my favorite JoJo is Joseph, followed by Josuke too. So I really like him as a main character in terms of just being interesting. He's written really well too, which I was gonna get into. He's written really well because like the kind of the themes of this part are about him finding himself and finding about who he is as a person, and that you're free to be who you are. Like, don't walk through this life being someone else or trying to follow someone else's path. Make your own path, become like, find who you are as a person, and then live that the best you can. And that's kind of what part eight's about. And Araki did a really good job of writing the perfect character to resemble the themes he wanted to resemble, or to present the themes he wanted to present. Okay, so really good main character and one of the best in the series by far. I'd say it's better than Johnny even from part 7. I'd think that's easy to say from like a story point of view, even if the part 7 story was probably better than part 8. So side characters, I like how you have like this Higashikata like household with all those characters. The thing that happens is like right away they make a big deal of like showing all these characters and like, okay, they're super important, and then like a lot of the series after that they're just not important, or they have battles with them and then they just like, okay, I'm a background character now, I don't matter anymore. So one thing that kind of brings part 8 down is the side characters, I feel like, but at the same time it does have some really good side characters like Yasuo. Like, I really like Yasuo, and her stand is like really good, especially like as time progresses. Like, her stand is just going to get better with more technology and stuff. So really good stand. And I brought up some of the characters. I'm looking at some of the other characters. Like, you have like Tamaki. He was like kind of interesting, but it was kind of like he just disappeared. Like, he just wasn't important anymore. Even though he was brought back story wise, I guess. So he did have story importance. But it seems like part of the series is fighting characters that, like, if they didn't fight, it didn't change much. It's just like they were kind of in their way. Holly as a character in part 8 was really cool. I liked seeing her again, and I liked her role in this part. It was really cool to see that. All right, so I really like, so kind of focusing on the main household now. We have like Norisuke. He himself as a character was like probably one of my favorite characters in the household. Jobin was really cool too. He was really mysterious, and like everyone thought he was a villain for a long time. And like, I mean, he kind of was. He had his own thing going on. But then you have like Sergey. Sergey was cool that he developed a lot through, like, towards the end. He developed into a much better character. So those characters, that the three I just mentioned, have a lot of development, I'd say, and are like interesting characters. But then you get into characters like Joshu, which is just like, who the frick cares about Joshu? Like, just a trash character, okay? Then you have Hato, like, she didn't do much, okay? Daya didn't do much. Um, Mitsuba didn't really do much. Like, I mean, she had like the badass moments of, but like didn't do much. Kato coming back, that was pretty goated. That was pretty dope, actually. That was pretty badass. That was pretty freaking hype, to be honest. So she's a pretty good character. I'll add that into like the good Higashikatas. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of, I think that's it for the household. But so if we go, I forgot almost to talk about. I almost forgot to talk about Rai, dude. Rai kind of came in, or Mamazuku. I'll just call him Mamazuku. Everyone calls him Mamazuku. He came in like, he started to come in, and I remember him coming in like a little bit more through the series than Joe Bros in the past did, but he was still like a super cool Joe Bro, and he served his purpose to like help. He felt a little like, I don't know. I didn't really feel a connection of like the friendship between him and Josuke too. So that was kind of something I wish it felt like they were better friends, or like I wish they had more of the connection Caesar and Joseph did. That'd be cool to see. But it was like as far as Joe Bros go, it was probably one of the like least interesting Joe Bros. So that's kind of sad to see for an otherwise really good part. Um all right, so abilities. A lot of unique abilities. Uh we also have to think about like rock humans were introduced, which I don't know if you consider that an ability. I guess that's kind of an ability, but that's something to think about. Um, uh, I'm looking through some of these abilities right now, and I really like one ability I really liked was the girl who like you open something for her stand to activate. I thought that was really cool. Josuke himself, his stand was super cool. Soft and wet. The bubbles that kid they remove, I think he could have used them more in battles to do the thing where like at the beginning of the series, he used his bubbles really cool to like remove properties of friction or stuff. But oh, what the hell? No. All right. Anyways, we're back. So at the beginning of the series, he uses bubbles really like well to remove friction and remove aspects of things. But I feel like as the series, as the part went along, he used that aspect less and less, which was kind of annoying. Um, and we saw that also in part five. Now that I think about it, where his ability to like, where Giorno's ability to like give life to things was used a lot at the beginning, and then it was kind of like abandoned. Like, yeah, he used it a few times later on, but it was kind of abandoned the further he went on, and he could have used it a lot better. But a lot of his battles came down to punching people to win, you know. So that's kind of annoying. It's sad to see in part five, and it's sad to see in part eight that happened. But because they could have had some really like even more interesting fights than there already was. But the fights were still pretty interesting. Yasuo's stand like for phenomenal stand, like just interesting. Um, Jobin's stand was interesting. Sergey's stand was interesting. Joshu's stand was interesting. Like fun fact, Josu's stand was originally gonna be Josuke's stand. If you didn't know that, but like so that's kind of interesting. I like how you have like Yoshikage, Kira, and Josefumi's stands like combining to create Josuke 2's stand. So that was cool. Uh, and then I mean the head doctor stand, that's pretty badass. But we'll talk about that when we get to the main antagonist, like we have been doing. So overall, the abilities, really interesting abilities, really well thought out abilities, and then you have like the body of Christ kind of coming back, and then oh, I almost like overlooked all of the Lokakaka or Rokakaka or whatever, and like what's the word they call it? Like transference or whatever. But like so that was an interesting ability, and I like how that was prevalent through the entire series, and it kept coming back. So that was cool to see. I like that. Uh, Overall plot we're moving to, um, it felt all over the place. It felt a little bit confusing. It felt like you'd have to like reread multiple times to be like, okay, I understand why they're here now and what the point of this is. And I think Araki wanted to create the feel of Morio again, like he did in part four, but like it's hard to like it's hard to understand that the part four city is the same as part eight because they feel so different. Like it's like if he didn't say the name of the cities, no one would ever even think for a second they're the same city in different universes because it's so different. And it has this different vibe that I think like the happenings of the city doesn't feel like as important anymore as it does like these characters are what they're doing, you know? The city feels bigger and more like I don't know, flat, I guess. So from a plot point of view, the setting was kind of boring. I'll say that. Uh Compared to part 4, which did it really well. Now, the progression of who's the main enemy throughout the series as like if you were reading along as this part happened, like every month when a new chapter came out, it was like, all right, are we gonna get anything we can like suspect on like who the new villain is, of who the main villain's gonna be. Is it Jobin? Is it there's some like weird people thought Kato might be the main villain. Like people thought all these different characters might be the main villain. It was like no one knew, and it kept everyone on their toes, and it kept everyone interested month to month for the chapter. So that was really cool. Um, so I like that feature of it. Oh, I was gonna say something too. So like quick intermission because I just want to like mention this. I thought it was freaking hilarious how they were like driving that Lamborghini and then the chapter started and they were just in a tree with it and never explained why they were in a tree with the Lamborghini or how they got the Lamborghini in the tree. Like there's no way Rocky like wrote that and like, oh, they'll figure it out. And he has some like thing in his head. Like he was like, oh, this is gonna be hilarious. Everyone's gonna be like, why is there a Lamborghini in the chapter in the tree? And why is no one mentioning that they have a Lamborghini in a tree or how it got there? I thought that was hilarious. Um, the Lambo, what you gonna do? The Lambo in the tree. So, plot. I liked how the plot progressed when you learned who the villain was. The last part of part 8, like the last section of part 8 was like very high intensity and kept you on your toes. Like you could feel the tension building. So I really like that, and I really like the first like 2/3 of the series kind of felt like really jumbled and like kind of going back and forth with itself. Where the last third felt like super like fast paced, intense, and I really like the last third. So the first 2/3 kind of brings down the rest of it, even though it like set up the rest of it. But I'd have to say the plot was pretty good. It was pretty good. I like it. I like it, Picasso. I like it, Picasso. Uh, fights. The fights. I liked it. It brought me back to some of the earlier parts fights. A lot of these fights did where they felt like high intensity and like what's gonna happen, how are they gonna beat them. It brought me back to the thinking of it's like chess, as I was reading this part. So I really liked that. I really liked seeing that. Um, I really liked. So I really liked the fights in this because it reminded me of some of the earlier parts of that had Stan's fights. So that was cool to see. And I hope we see more of that in the future because I kind of like the style of fight. If we got more fights, like how part 5 did fights, I think we'd be really well off for the series for JoJo lands. Main antagonist. What's his freaking name? All right, main antagonist Toru, right? Toru. He himself is less interesting than his stand is. His stand is more interesting than him. He has like some weird morals. He's a rock human. He's like weird goals. Like it's interesting that like I don't know. It's what makes him a good antagonist is that how elusive he was and how good he was at hiding who he was. And his stand helped him do that. Now, his stand like I want to talk about his stand more than I want to talk about him because his stand was like super cool. Like one panel that comes to mind is when, or one scene I guess it's like a set of panels is when the guy was trying to go after him in the hallway in the hospital, and he like pushed a cart into his leg, and the dude's leg was just like gone. Like I thought that was so cool. I was like, oh shit, like what's going on? So I really liked seeing his stand like be everywhere at once, and it was super it was chaotic because there was this feeling of how the heck can they even beat him, and it got to a point where you realized Josuke is gonna have to evolve his like abilities more or like realize he has an ability that he didn't know about if he wants to defeat this enemy. And which Josuke did. He realized his stands aren't actual bubbles, they're just string spinning, which spin got brought back now that I think about it. Um it's just spring it's like or sorry, it's string spinning so rapidly that it like appears to be a bubble, right? So that's pretty cool, and I like the final fight was super interesting. One of my favorite things that happened in part 8 was when Araki started describing the plane and how like different parts of the planes fall off each year, and like how it's like the odds of a big piece of a plane coming off, and it's like is almost zero. And so it's cool how you see like it is his stand rewriting fate no matter what. His stand is rewriting fate, and you can see this thing coming straight for it. And for like a few chapters, or it might have been a couple of chapters, that you have this like this thing is coming towards Yasuo. So this thing is coming towards Yasuo, and like and it's like it's gonna hit or something's gonna happen, and this is gonna be interesting, right? So that was really cool, and I really that moment kind of stuck out to me thinking back about part 8 and the final fight from when they finally defeated him. I really liked it because it had like Josuke evolved his stand to a point where he realized something about himself that allowed him to evolve his stand to make his stand better to be able to defeat the villain. So that was cool. It was more like Josuke was fighting himself than he was fighting Toru. So that's why it was pretty good writing towards the end of the series. That's kind of all I have to say about part 8, but I really like part 8, and I really like a lot of the characters and stuff through it. So it was pretty fun. It's a fun part. So I think I'm gonna put this in A tier. So okay. So looking over the list now, we'll go from the bottom. So I like that part 1 is here. I think it's like I think it fits. It's not supposed to be good, and compared to the other part, that's not. It's the first part he wrote, and it might be the easiest to follow of any of the parts, but it's not the best part by any means. So I think it fits there. Uh, part 3, I just don't like part 3 that much. It's too long. Jotaro's not a good character. It has some really good moments, but overall, it's just I think it fits where it is. Part 2 is really good. Joseph kind of carries the part, in all honesty, of everything else. And part 6 is pretty good. If there was a category between B and C, part 6 would probably be there, because I don't feel part 6 is as good as part 2, but I don't feel it's as bad as part 3. So that's something to think about. We have part 8 and part 5 in A tier, which I stand by. I think part 8 probably had the best fights in the series. And part 8 probably had some of the most interesting like abilities or character writing in the series, I'd say. But not both of these, or so like that kind of hails though in comparison to like the overall greatness of the two that are in S tier. There's not many negatives to look at for the two I put in S tier, right? That's why they're in S tier. For part 4, I don't think there's anything I can think of that I don't like about part 4. All of it felt like fun, and the most important thing about all of it, of every part of JoJo, is what's the most fun to watch, right? So part 4 overall was just the most fun to watch, you know? So that's I think it fits there easily. And part 7 is just really well written, and it's fun to read. So I think it deserves to be there as well. If anything, if I had to decide, now that I'm thinking about it, between part 4 and part 7 for what's the best JoJo part, I'd probably say part 4 is the best part, and I think even Araki says part 4 is his favorite part. I could be wrong on that though. Don't quote me on that. But I think that's it. That's overall. That's my list. That's why things are in the place they are. And what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I know a lot of people will disagree with a lot of things on this list, and I want to hear it because maybe there's something that like, oh, I didn't think about that. Like, oh, I'll freaking that changes this, and then maybe I'll make like a quick update video if anything changes. So let me know if you disagree, and more than important than that you disagree, like why do you disagree, and explain your point of view to me. And I like seeing a lot of different point of views, but for me, I think this is a pretty good list, and I'd be hesitant to move anything on this list anywhere really. But all right, that's the list. What do you guys think? Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.